Hi, friends. Today I'm getting into the 16 books that I read in March. I know, 16 is a lot, even for me. So grab a cup of something and let's dive in. The first book that I finished in March was for my novel Women's Society. This novel that I selected was Middlemarch. My novel Women's Society is basically I have selected a novel for every month during the year of 2025 that is considered a classic or a modern classic that pretty much follows the perspective of women and the trials, tribulations, struggles that we've gone through. And so March's selection was Middlemarch by George Eliot. I will say this is quite a chunker of a book. It is hundreds of pages. I actually ended up listening to it because it was just such a large novel, and I knew that I could get lost in the classic language if I tried to read this at night when I'm tired and I'm winding down for bed. I knew that it would be a slog of a book for me otherwise. So I chose to listen to it. I only gave this 3 stars. It was not that I didn't like this book, but it's very well written. It's a beautifully written book. However, for me, it was beautifully boring. We are following the town of Middlemarch as it's beginning to take its first steps towards modernization. And so we are following a couple of women. We're following a prodigal. We're following a doctor. And why, yes, we are following the women's stories, particularly the one that I found most interesting was Dorothea. She's very idealistic. She was choosing to marry for actual compatibility and love versus societal standing, which was an interesting perspective to take, particularly in the early 1800s when this book takes place. Other than that, I can't say that there was anything really exciting about this book. You really are just following different stories of people within this town as the town, again, is moving towards modernization and kind of reshaping itself. The next book I read, I actually listened to. You will find that the majority of books that I read this month, I actually read via audiobook. I know some people don't consider that reading, but it is indeed reading in my eyes. Now that the weather is kind of thawing out, spring is springing outside, I am spending a lot of time outside, prepping the yarn trailer, dyeing yarn, doing all those things. So while I'm busy doing those sorts of tasks, audiobooks are the way that I go. It's a way of keeping my mind focused and providing a little bit of entertainment while I'm going through tasks at hand that don't otherwise necessarily engage my mind other than measuring. It would be very much like if you were listening to an audiobook while you're preparing dinner. So the next book that I listened to is The 9-Month Contract by Amy Dawes. This was an advanced reader's copy for me, and I did like this book. I gave it 4 stars, but the premise for is kind of gave me the ick. So this is a grumpy mountain man who's living on this mountain, and his brothers have built homes on this mountain as well, and he's single and he wants to start a family. He's very attached to his niece, and he'd really like a child of his own to kind of establish and build a solid relationship now that his niece is getting older. And so he puts I think it was an ad, like a Craigslist ad type of thing, and he's basically seeking a surrogate. He's gone through a clinic and he's just not happy. He's got some really high standards And somehow we have this gal, Trista, she's down on her luck. She's, she needs money really bad. She wants to start this business. And so she goes to the clinic and she can't, they won't accept her. And as she's coming out, she kind of runs into Mr. Mountain Man's niece. And the niece kind of coordinates all of this. Lo and behold, Trista ends up being his surrogate. And there's some shenanigans with how that kind of goes down because they're doing it DIY style. It Once you get past that, it was kind of a cute, grumpy sunshine novel. We got this grumpy mountain man and this sunshine kind of gal. It's a small town romance. We've got this a little bit of an age gap between them. We have a curvier female main character. And there are some steamy scenes. I would say if you are fans of like Tessa Bailey type stuff, then you will probably like this novel. I will say that despite the whole surrogacy thing being a little off for me, it was a cute little romance novel if you can get past that. This book I actually read. I had an advanced copy of it. I believe it is out already. It's called This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. If you know me, you know that I am actually a pretty big fan of Ashley Winstead. I think she's pretty incredible. She's kind of done some bouncing between genres, and I find that kind of intriguing. Her first book, Only in My Dreams I Hold a Knife, I loved it. So I am always anxiously awaiting the next Ashley Winstead novel, and this one did not disappoint. This Book Will Bury Me, I gave 5 stars. Now, I will say this book was really geared around true crime, and I am by no means a true crime fan. I don't listen to true crime podcasts. I don't watch true crime like documentaries. I just pretty much have zero interest in true crime. So I was a little hesitant going into this novel, but I will say that it was kind of intriguing for me because we're following our main character, Jane. It is 1 year after this horrible crime in Idaho, and she's grieving the death of her father, and she's really looking for a way to kind of distract herself. And she falls into that rabbit hole of true crime. She ends up befriending other like armchair detectives, and there is this shocking 3 college girls are murdered, but the 4th girl in the house somehow doesn't get murdered. And so the police are being kind of cagey. They're not really releasing a whole lot to the media. And so this really follows and centers around her and her true crime friends and how they navigate trying to be, again, armchair detectives. So you are seeing a lot of dialogue. I think for me, that's what really sucked me in is the constant dialogue, because they're all in these internet chats and eventually like Zooms, and they're going to these places where these crimes are happening. So really fascinating read. And again, we're reading it from this perspective of Jane, and it's supposed to be, the most famous crime in history, and only she's the one who knows the true story. I will say that it's my understanding from listening to interviews with Ashley Winstead, she did lose her dad. So I think the grieving daughter part is hugely authentic in this story, because I think it was a cathartic piece for the author to write it that way. And it is my understanding that the college girls being murdered in Idaho hits is kind of based off of a true story. And I don't think that case is actually gone completely through. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out in real life, but it is loosely based on those. The next book I read was also an advanced reader's copy, and it was called The Page Turner by Viola Shipman. And for this one, we're following a young romance writer, and she is the daughter of sort of like an elitist family, and her parents own a publishing company, and they only, publish really highbrow, snooty type of books, which clearly Emma does not write as a romance writer. So she's written her first book, and she's kind of been in the closet about it while she's been away at college, and her parents would totally disapprove of this. And it turns out her parents' publishing company is in a bit of financial trouble, and they've kind of gotten in bed with this author who is hugely famous, makes a ton of money, but there's just something Emma doesn't like about him. She finds him extremely slimy, and for good reason. We discover that throughout the novel. But while she's trying to deal with her parents, she also has a sister who is a very well-known social media influencer. And her sister pretty much pushes on all of social media all these authors and books. And she does get paid to advertise these books that her parents are publishing. But she herself doesn't read that stuff either. So for the first part of the book, I really did not like the sister dynamic. I found Emma's sister to be just awful. And I'm a sister, that's a really special dynamic. So it was really hard for me, like, even in moments where my sister and I have really butted heads and haven't wanted to talk to each other for a while, I just could not get down with the way this sister was treating Emma. About the 50% mark, the table turned, and then it felt like a more natural dynamic. I did give this book, I believe 4 stars. I did really enjoy it. For a lighter contemporary fiction novel, I did enjoy it. The next book I read was also an advanced reader's copy. And so I did read this one, just like the Ashley Winstead book. I flew through this one too. This one is called The Perfect Divorce by Geneva Rose. My sister and I are actually going to go hear her talk here in a few weeks. So I'm really excited to go and hear her talk about this new book. I believe it comes out on April 22nd. I gave it 5 stars. It is the second book. It is a follow-up to her first big novel, which was called The Perfect Marriage. And so in that book, we're following Sarah, and Sarah she's a attorney, and she ends up having to defend her husband in a criminal case. He is charged with the murder of a woman that he was having an affair with. And the reason he's being charged is because all the details kind of point to him, because she was found pretty much slaughtered in the bed in like their vacation home. So this is the follow-up to it. It's about 12 years later. Sarah is remarried, and she's remarried to this man named Bob. And it turns out Bob had a little indiscretion. It's supposedly like a one-time thing, but now that woman is missing, and then somebody else turns up dead. So we are following Sarah going through similar but not the same type of thing. And there's always all these moving pieces where everyone's doing bad and messed up things. And so you're just trying to navigate the story and in a way kind of figured out who did it. But there are some really great plot twists in this. So fantastic book. If you haven't read The Perfect Marriage, I would start there and then follow it up with The Perfect Divorce. One of the books that I listened to towards the beginning of March, it came in through my library, and that is The Blackbird Oracle by Deborah Harkness. This is the fifth book in the Discovery of Witches sequence, and I think I listened to most of those books so far this year. I remember reading the first one, like a physical copy of it, but at the beginning of this year, as I anticipated getting this fifth book and Discovery of Witches coming out on Netflix, I opted to go ahead and go back to the beginning and work my way through the books. And this is the newest book that's been published. You're following Diane Bishop, who is found to be a witch. She's now married to a vampire who's a geneticist. They're both professors at a university. And by this book, we are now kind of following the story of their children. Their children have hit an age where the Witches Society basically wants to test them to figure out how powerful are these children, particularly because it was thought all along that a witch and a vampire couldn't procreate. So I found this story really fascinating because, again, these children, they were born in, I think, the previous book, and now they're a little bit older and they're coming into their own. I want to say they're like 7 or 8. They might be a little older, but I think they're about 7 or 8, and they're kind of coming into their powers, and they're learning how to control those powers. And the children are very different. One's a boy, one's a girl, and they have very different powers, though they do have some similarities. So I found it really fascinating. They link Diana back to like the Proctor family during like the Salem witch trials. Yeah, the twins are 7. Pip and Rebecca are their names based on my notes here. So essentially, we follow the story of how they navigate the all the secrets that are coming out, and the story of these 2 kids. I loved it. I think some people think that this could have been like an offshoot, a separate series, since we're delving into the children, but I love it. I'm here for it. One of the books that I listened to this month is Everyone Here is Lying by Shari Lapina. This one started out a little slow for me as a domestic thriller, but I actually really loved it. It was a 5-star read for me, or a 5-star listen. We're following the story of William, and William has a family, but his daughter Avery I don't remember them actually saying what her diagnosis was, but sort of oppositional defiance disorder, where she's just a really difficult child. And William comes home one day and Avery is home from school early and she's by herself. Now, he's coming home from a motel, meeting his mistress. He's having an affair and something horrible happened. And then he gets home. Avery's not supposed to be there. She's being extremely difficult. He ends up striking her. And then she goes running out of the house. Or actually, he strikes her so hard, she ends up on the floor, and he's like, don't tell mommy, all that kind of thing. He ends up leaving. He's so frustrated with himself. He's frustrated with the woman he's having an affair with. He's frustrated beyond. Well, he leaves and goes for a drive while his wife gets home. Avery ends up missing. Avery's missing for days. So we're following the story as they try to figure out what happened to Avery. And as you can imagine, William's not being forthright with the police. And so there's some weirdness there. It is one heck of a ride of a story. And we do eventually get the perspective of Avery as well as William's wife. So fascinating read, pretty quick read or listen as well. The next book that I listened to, I was told that I would really enjoy repeatedly by more than one person. They thought I would really enjoy this book. It was All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. And it's a missing person mystery. There's a serial killer thriller vibe to it. There's a love story. And there's kind of some unique twists in the story. So one would think, since I like contemporary romance novels, I like thrillers, that this would probably be up my alley. But there was too much missing person mystery for me to really dig into this. So while there were aspects of the story that I enjoyed, I can't say I really enjoyed the book overall. So I gave this 3 stars, which for me just means it was an okay book. It was fine. There wasn't necessarily anything that I didn't like in it, but I read it and but I didn't love it. So you're following the daughter of a wealthy family. There's a local boy who ends up saving this girl when she kind of goes missing. And then there's another little girl that's in love with that boy, and you're following them as they age up and become adults in life, and they've all moved on. And for me, again, it just wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't a bad book. I understand why a lot of people enjoy it. I just could not get the missing person mystery of it. Really just aggravated me. I could have done without that part. I don't particularly like mysteries. So after reading All the Colors of the Dark, I switched gears in my audiobook reading and read You Can't Have It All by Stassi Schroeder. And if you don't know who she is a former reality star on Bravo. She was on Vanderpump Rules. And she basically, early on in 2020, we're going through a global pandemic, but she also got canceled in the world of reality. So she lost all her jobs. And she got canceled because she was ensnared in some really bad behavior that was kind of racially charged. I think through the last several years, she's kind of learned and evolved as a person. And she now has had a couple kids. She's married. And this book focused on the idea of, as women, we can't have it all. You can have it all. You just can't have things at the same time. And that why would you want to subject yourself to all the stress of trying to have it all at once? And so she kind of gave up on the idea of the whole girl boss idea, which I'm not a fan of that word anyway. I think women can be bosses, but I'm just not a fan of the phrasing of girl boss. So this was kind of an interesting read, as she kind of discovered as she was maturing and evolving as a person and having children and navigating marriage and navigating motherhood and navigating being a writer, having a successful podcast. Like, how do you balance and juggle that? Because you can't have it all, and you will really stress yourself out if you try and have it all at once. I will say, some of what she has to say has to do with choosing the right partner. The next book I read is a book that came out last summer by Carly Fortune. Carly Fortune she writes what most would consider beach reads, and they do always take place at some sort of beachy location. But I will say, as a contemporary romance writer, there is just this depth and breadth of her characters that I really enjoy. So in this story, we're following Lucy, and she's visiting as a tourist. She's kind of vacationing on Prince Edward Island, and her childhood best friend, their family has a home on Prince Edward Island, and she has this pact with her best friend that one of the things is she can never fall in love with her younger brother. So Lucy's like, okay, no big deal. Well, Lucy's vacationing on Prince Edward Island. She meets this guy. She hits it off with him. Their chemistry is just unreal. Well, fast forward several months where she's with her best friend, and it turns out that guy she had kind of a fling with and had really great chemistry with is her best friend's brother. So there's just this inner angst going on with Lucy, and then Lucy and Felix are still having a relationship, even if most of the time it's just at a friendship level. And there's just this really weird dynamic amongst the three of them, Lucy, Felix, and then Felix's older sister, Bridget. And so we're kind of navigating those relationships and that story. It's a really lovely book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, it's a beautiful, romance, but we are dealing with some trickier subject matter. We're dealing with if I was going to name triggers, Lucy's had the death of a loved one, so she's going through different stages of grief. There's obviously a reason that Bridget doesn't want her friends to date her brother, so there's some issues there. But if you're looking for a good, fun summer read, I would definitely recommend This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. Carly Fortune does have her beach read of this year coming out next month in May. So the next book I read was This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. This was a 5-star read for me. Again, I read the book that she wrote that was published last year. I really liked that one. This one for me was even better. We're following Soledad, who's married. She is like the perfect wife. She can host the perfect dinner party. She's raising their child. She, from appearance wise, everything is perfect. And though she is having a little bit of trouble in her marriage, she's not thinking, it's kind of just niggling at the back of her head, nothing at the forefront. But what we soon discover is that her husband gets arrested by the federal government for, I think it was like extortion, like some big white collar crime, siphoning money out of his company. And the reason that it was discovered is that there was a new like forensic accountant type of person that was hired in his company. And her husband can't stand this man. Well, lo and behold, that's the man who ultimately gets him arrested. But as we go through this story, we're following the relationship between Soledad and this guy, I think his name is Jordan, who is that accountant that got him in trouble. And so we're watching her struggling with her daughter, or her daughters, that she's got 2, and how she's really trying to, one, figure out how she's going to support her children, because now all their assets are frozen, and she doesn't know how she's going to pay the bills, feed her family, that sort of thing. So her friends do kind of swoop in and kind of help her rise. And then she's also struggling because there is some chemistry with this other man who is kind of the reason her husband has been sent to prison. So this was a beautiful story because, again, we're watching her raise her children, but we're also on the other side of this story watching, again, I think his name is Jordan, and he is divorced from his previous wife, and they have 2 boys that are twins that are on the spectrum, but they are very different in where they are on that spectrum. So it was really interesting to watch those two co-parent and try and do right by those boys, as well as the romantic relationship between him and this other woman. So this was a really lovely story, and I think even the deeper topics at play here were very well done. The next book that I listened to is actually the third in a series. It's called Summer on Highland Beach. This is by Sunny Hostin. You might be familiar with her. She's on The View. I don't watch The View, so I'm not overly familiar, but I do read this series. The first one was called, I believe, The Summer on Sag Harbor. I don't remember what the second one was called. I do believe she has a team of writers. She's not solely writing these books on her own, but they are beautifully written. I really enjoy the storylines. Though the books are kind of they're sequential. You could definitely read them out of order and probably not miss a beat. They will overall make a lot more sense if you read them in sequential order. And The Summer on Highland Beach was the third in the series, and this one actually surprised me right out the gate. This book in particular is about Highland Beach, which I did not know is right here in Annapolis, Maryland, and it is the oldest historically Black beach community in America, and it was created by the son of Frederick Douglass. And this community is still there. They are kind of like their own township, so like they have their own law enforcement, they have their own mayor, but they are a closed community, meaning even though Frederick Douglass's like summer home is there, it is not open to the public. I think when I rabbit hole down, there's like 80 homes back there on the bay, but most of them are passed down from family to family, though there have been some that have been sold outright. But we're following the story of Olivia, who has kind of discovered part of her legacy has to do with family drama, and it takes place here in this Highland Beach. And she kind of has to discover, does she want to be a part of this legacy that she's just discovered now that her grandmother is deceased and all these secrets or lies have come forward. I thought this was a beautifully written book. Again, I did enjoy it. And for me, because I'm so close in proximity to where it takes place, I found it particularly of interest. The next book I listened to was called The Blonde Identity by Ali Carter. And for me, this falls in line very much like the Finley Donovan series by El Casamino and the Vera Wong series by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This one I gave 4 stars. It is one of those really quirky, I don't want to say cozy mystery, but it's just really funny. This one, it's the middle of the night in Paris, and following the story of this woman. She wakes up, she's got amnesia. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know where she is. She just knows there's this really hot guy, kind of leaning over her, telling her to get up and run. She's got a splitting headache. She doesn't know who this man is. Again, she doesn't know who she is. And, there's people chasing her, trying to kill her. So it turns out she is the twin of a spy. And so these people are trying to kill her sister, and they think she is her sister because they're identical twins. So we're following the story of her and this guy. They end up boarding, I want to say, a cruise ship, and they're pretending they're on their honeymoon. Ultimately, they're looking for her sister, and there's all kinds of shenanigans that transpire. It's not a terribly long book, but definitely quirky, definitely funny. Well worth the read. I gave it 4 stars. I think there's a second one coming out, and I'll probably read that one too. It was that funny. The next book I listened to was The Last Party by Claire McIntosh. This was another 3-star read for me. This was more of a whodunit mystery and not so much a thriller. And again, I'm not much of a mystery reader. I mean, I read them unknowingly, and in some cases I like them, but most of the time I don't. Um, so again, it was a 3-star read. It wasn't a bad book. Excuse me, it just wasn't my cup of tea. So this is the story of Reese. He has thrown this big party on the beach. It's like midnight. He ends up dead. Everybody wakes up in the morning, and obviously everybody that was in attendance at that party that's staying in all these like beach bungalows, they are now suspects. And so we're literally going through the process of watching the police interview everybody. There's some crazy, of course, interwoven storylines. Of course, we've got other people that I wouldn't say are unsavory necessarily, but it's just like bad people doing bad things. And again, if you like kind of that whodunit mystery, you would probably like this one, but it just wasn't for me. So one of the books that I listened to was called A Return to Common Sense: How to Fix America Before We Blow It, by Lee McGowan. And this was a 4-star book for me. I follow her on Instagram, and I kind of feel she's kind of a straight shooter. I did learn that she is Canadian. She was an immigrant to our country. She isn't now a U.S. citizen, but this was a really great book that, for those that didn't get a great civics lesson in school, this I felt was a really easy, digestible way to review how our government actually works if you didn't know. But she essentially is addressing the crisis that we're facing in this country. I want to say this book was published last year, so this is all pre this current administration. But she basically follows through history, yes, how our government works and how it came to be, but she kind of had these 6 pillars that the chapters of this book really kind of focused on based on the history of our country. The idea that America is the land of freedom, that according to our Constitution, everyone should have the opportunity to rise. Every person should have a vote, and that vote should be counted. Representatives should represent the people who elected them, that the law applies to every single one of us, and that our government as a whole should be a force for good. And so those are the 6 main principles that she's covering in this book. I think it was really well done. And she has an interesting perspective, because she is so well versed in our government, considering she immigrated to this country, I believe as an adult, not as a child. So it wasn't like she went through a civics or a government class like most of us do growing up. The last book that I read in March or listened to was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This is another author who publishes sort of like a beach romance read every spring, summerish. And so she is due, I think, to have one come out in May as well. This is another author that I think does a really good job of writing a contemporary romance that's not real light and fluffy, and does delve a little bit deeper, and our characters are not superficial. And so in this one, we're following, maybe I should tell you the name of the book. It's called The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. And so we're following the story of Hannah and Jack. Jack is this mega like superstar, and he needs to go home to his family ranch. His mom is going through like cancer treatments or has to go through a surgery, and he wants to be there for her. But because he's so famous and he's got a stalker, so his team of professionals hire a bodyguard. Well, Hannah is a bodyguard, and she doesn't looking at her, she doesn't look like a bodyguard, which is kind of the point in this particular instance. She's about 5'4", 5'6", somewhere on the shorter side. She's kind of a petite woman, but she is highly skilled and trained as a bodyguard. And so in this story, we are fake dating essentially because he's going back to, take care of his mom, but his family doesn't know that he has a stalker. So the idea that has been concocted is that she will pose as his girlfriend. And so she has to behave as she's the girlfriend, sleep in the same room, hold his hand, kiss him, that kind of stuff. So lovely story, but our characters do have some depth. They are going through their own personal struggles and how they navigate those struggles and help support each other along the way was really a lovely read. Okay, so we got through all 16 books. Again, it's quite a lot for even me, but again, I'm spending a lot of time dyeing yarn and doing all the tasks to get the mobile trailer up and running by the end of the month for festival season. So I would love to hear if you had similar reactions to any of these books, if you've read them, or if you haven't read them, is there anything on my list that I read in March that has really piqued your interest? I'd love to know what you're maybe adding to your library hold list, or you're running out the next time you're at the bookstore and grabbing a copy of it. Until next week, happy knitting, happy reading, and I'll see you next week.
Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time. Don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin takes me back.